Sometimes you just got to get away. Sometimes you just got to get away. I'm not talking about your super negative associations and friendships and places. Like all your negative buddies and all the drugs and all the alcohol and all the pornography and the sleeping around and just that type of stuff. Yeah, you need to get away from that. What I'm talking about is the more normal, stable stuff that just don't seem to be working. It don't. It doesn't. I try to speak good English, but I'm old redneck. And I like to talk like a redneck. But I'll correct myself every once in a while to show those of you out there who are educated that I'm educated. Things that you've been doing for years that are good things. Associations and friends and groups and churches and communities, family. That's been a huge part of your life and for the most part a good thing. But here lately, something is just not clicking with you in this setting. And I'm not talking, some of you yay-heels will think about, yeah, it's not working in my marriage. I think I just need to get out. You're an idiot. I ain't talking about that. And I'm going to mention specifically what I'm talking about in my life, so stay tuned. But just stuff that gave you joy is just not giving you joy anymore. Associations that were very fruitful and beneficial in your life are not anymore. The friendship you had just not. It's not an iron sharpening iron situation anymore. You're growing, but an association you have, the friendship you have, he's not growing. And you find he's bringing you down. The church you may be a part of, or church in general, and I believe with all my heart that Jesus died for the church. I know he died for the church, and I know that we are supposed to, in some form or fashion, be a part of a local body of believers in a church. And I do not believe it's possible to be all that God intends for you to be without a church body. But I do have to say that a lot of what is being called church today is not. It's not church at all. It's just ungodly organization and not holy. It may be a place where you feel good, but for the most part, these contemporary churches are just nothing but a bunch of deceptive cesspools. It's disgusting what's going and passing as churches today. It may be your job. A job that you wanted, that you pursued early on, that you might have even got a college education for. But regardless of that, it's It's a job that has brought you satisfaction, and it has taken uh, good care of you and your family. One of the things we teach in our programs is that we want men to work for themselves. We believe that's a biblical principle, and we have biblical models for that, and we have historical proof that that is the best. So I'm not talking about a job that you've had for years that's, you know, got you maybe a little bit above barely making it by. You know, been able to take care of your family and pay the bills, but not do much less. I'm always going to encourage you to get out of that situation. What I'm talking about is a job that provides you a level of comfort and security and happiness in your home. You like going to your job, and it pays you well. And you know, I don't know all the situation that's out there, but you need to start thinking that you need to be making, you know, change your mindset a bit. That you need to be making over 80,000 a year if you're going to have a job. You know, sometimes that ain't gonna cut it. But if you still want to have a job, you know, you're not gonna get rich with a job, but you know, you need to start realizing that $100,000 ain't a whole lot a year. But let's just say this is a job and it's good and it's provided you a good, comfortable, happy living, got all your bills paid. You can get whatever you want for the most part. You're not going in huge debt. You can get your wife whatever she wants. Things are happy, you're secure, but there's just something now inside you that's just, it don't satisfy like it used to. You may be in ministry. You may be a pastor. It just ain't what it used to be for you. And you're not questioning your call. You're not questioning the desires and dreams of your heart. You're just not, it's not here anymore. A couple things at play here, and then I'm going to tell you where I'm at, where I am. I'm talking to, assuming that you watching me, this is all applicable to a man that's growing. In some capacity, he's growing. He's maturing. He's fairly stable. Or I may be talking to a guy who's just totally oblivious to what I'm saying here. We can help you in our program, but this video is for those guys that they're pretty stable. There's just something in them that's not right. Something has changed. One thing that may be going on is you've plateaued. You're at that point in your life that God has brought you so far. And it's been easy, and it's been comfortable. It's a well-oiled machine. You can't find anything wrong or nagging about it. There's nothing jumping out at you. You just have this sense of you're just not fulfilled anymore. I think God's getting ready to move you on. So be open to that. And if you've been walking with God for any length of time, then you know that there's going to be trials and tribulations, and He's going to send you through fire. He's going to send you through hard times, and this might be one of those things. I've heard this analogy said multiple times through the years. I've preached it like this. I still think there's good truth in it, but your brooks have dried up. When he had Elijah by the brook for 3 years, ravens came and gave him food. Man, I want to preach on this now I'm thinking about it. Ravens brought him food and plenty of water. His brook dried up, and God sent him on to another mission. You think Elijah got used to that situation? Elijah walked with God. Elijah was a wild man. Elijah walked with God. And I believe he had sweet fellowship with God there at the brook, being fed by the ravens, seeing God every day. Something happened. Physically, that brook dried up. And I'm sure Elijah, human like all of us, had his wonderment, his worry. We don't know for sure, but we have examples in Elijah's life that he struggled with some things. And he's human. Maybe God's just drying up your brook where you are. And he's trying to get you to move on someplace. So be open to that. Ask him for guidance and direction. And see what he does. And be attentive to what you feel in your heart. And don't dismiss it. It might be totally opposite of everything you've done and been. Go with it. Start writing things down. Write them down. Pen and paper, write them down. There's good practices on our tablets and our phones and computers, but there's a physiological and scientifically, historically proven study that writing things down has a greater impact on our lives and our memory, our creative abilities. And then I've learned within the last 2 months that blue ink on white paper has even a greater effect. Now, I'm a yellow legal guy, Pat. I've been doing that for years. So I'm going to transition as I learn. It may be a small thing, but yeah, I don't want to give up my yellow legal pads. But hey, if I'm going to grow and there's something to that, then I'm going to find me some white legal pads. I don't like spiral bound stuff. But God's moving you. Something's going on. Or the circumstance is such, and this is where I'm at, that you know you have to do something. There's something going on that you can no longer tolerate, that you can no longer be a part of, you can't associate with, you can't let your name be attached to that thing or that organization. So let me tell you how that has shown up in my life through the years and where I am right now with that. I'm a Baptist. I'm an independent Baptist. And got no problem saying I'm an independent Baptist. I do have a lot of problems with our independent Baptist brethren and a lot of pastors acting like little dictators. I've been under them. I've heard horror stories about it. And even as a young man, late teens, early 20s, I know, man, I don't want any part to do with it. I don't want this. Even though up until my 40s, in my own personal walk and hurting my family and my own pride and dictatorial ways that I was blind to for so many years, I saw this in pastors and how they were running their churches and their people. And I thought, man, that ain't right. I don't know. And when I'd experienced it, that ain't right, man. You're the pastor. And I believe God's people ought to have a certain reverential kind of respect for that office. But when you boil it all down, he may be called and he may have been chosen and put there by authority to be the pastor of that church, but you're just a man. And in most cases, you ain't any more spiritual than your people. That being said, for those of you who think that you're you have the right to pastor just as much as the pastor does. It's got nothing to do with you being spiritual or not. Okay, it's a placement, it's a calling, it's a leadership position that's been put there, and God calls men to pastor, and He calls most to be lay people. It doesn't make him any more spiritual, and it don't make you, because you are spiritual, eligible to be a pastor. So don't get those confused. The pastors being little dictators, or little kingdoms, and using men as pawns. And I've seen it where the second man or third man or men on staff, they're the ones bringing the life to the church. The pastor ain't bringing jack diddly squat. He might be a good leader in a lot of ways, and he's the pastor of that church, and we have to, again, have a level of respect of that. And he's a good teacher and preacher overall. But he ain't the one bringing the life. And that don't make it right for the man who is bringing the life to assert that authority. Again, I got to say, don't get it confused. So many people get that confused. And where the pastor made some decisions in this one example I'm thinking of, and it hurt the church. It hurt the church, and he took it all out on the second man. But anyway, that's the stuff that I've seen. So one way I've thought about that is, I don't have to keep the name Baptist. Okay, a lot of preachers and churches, they're more concerned about what's on the outside of their Bible, like the lettering on the outside of the Bible, than they are with what the Bible teaches inside, meaning King James. I'm a King James man, there ain't no doubt about it. I am King James. But as I change, I'm willing to ask God, am I missing something about the King James? I don't believe I am at all. It don't make any sense to not be anything other than King James. And I know all the history and all the trash and the nastiness and the immorality that has been associated, and the money associated with all these other translations that are not translations, falsely so called. It's disgusting. It's disgusting when you know the history of it all. So I know why I'm King James. But I've been willing to consider it. But men been so concerned about the King James on the side of their Bible, they're neglecting God's word inside the Bible. Okay, I'm a King James man. It's absolutely, it's one of my foundational beliefs. But the King James is not on the same tier as the virgin birth of Jesus Christ. It's down here. It's important, but it ain't on par with the doctrine of the blood of Jesus Christ and salvation by grace through faith alone. Okay, it's not up here. There are level of important things in the Bible and doctrine and teaching. So, man, I always get off on tangents here. But they developed these beliefs that it's so important to be called Baptist that they miss the mark. And I've thought about just going and being part of a Christian church, or when I start the next church I start, to simply be a Christian church. Or not to even have Christian on it, not to even have church on it. I mean, I don't know, because we don't need to be tied down with labels, but labels do say something. There is a balance there. And then it's always, one of my mantras is do right, leave the consequences up to God. We need to quit thinking and manipulating and trying to figure out how this is going to affect the masses. Just do right and leave the consequences up to God. So if I feel led to start a church and not to have Baptist be on the name and just be a Christian church, I don't have to think about what all the Christian churches in my area are called. Just be God's man, do God's work, let Him deal with it. So where I am currently, I've caught myself, the Lord has put me in situations most of my life where I have been the second man to train wreck churches. Churches that in some form or fashion were just messed up. Either messed up in their doctrine, messed up in their life, not dealing with sin properly, the pastor having no power, the pastor having no evidence that he's even called, even being behind that pulpit. Immorality going on in the churches, embezzlement going on in the churches, affairs going on, or, this is a 3,000 seat auditorium, and you ain't got 15 people. Just been a part of train wreck churches, dying churches. And me being the one that's bringing them to life. Now, that story I told you about the pastor getting on the second man wasn't me. I was a part of that situation, but it wasn't me. But I have been that second man. And by God's grace, and I know it, He's called me, He's led me. You need to recognize your call. Don't brag about it, but be honest about it. I know God's hand is on my life. And I know God, wherever I go, breathes life into that church. And His power is on me when I teach and preach and when I study. And there's not one thing I am more sure of, except one other thing. I'll leave that one alone. But the close thing I'm sure of is that God has called me to teach and preach. I wonder sometimes the format He wants me to do. Because currently, this is where I'm going with my story. I'm not in a church right now. But I am teaching and preaching on the internet until I get clarity. But everywhere I go, every time I study, I put messages together, I put thoughts together, or if I do just something like this off the cuff, I can feel it in me. It's a good truth. He told me to bring it out. Don't mean everything's perfect all the time, but for the most part, man, I know this is what God wants me to do in my life. And everywhere I go, I bring freedom and liberty and life and fire. I've been doing that for years. And the Lord has let me see some things and suffer through some things. I was a part of a church one time that, man, I don't even want to tell this. I guess it was just as dead as it come. Could not believe how dead this church was. And me and my wife were looking into an issue that we wanted to start implementing in our lives that a lot of Baptists don't do. And she asked that pastor's wife about it, and all she did was yell at my wife. Didn't help her at all. And we were just starting to go there. I mean, our choices were very limited. I was in a military town. And it was in this town that I started thinking, Lord, you probably want me to start a church at some point in time somewhere. So we didn't go there. So I was choosing between him and another church. Because, the first church I went to, it's like I hardly could find him. It was even before internet was even really that big of a thing. And I looked him up and found him. Somehow I found him in one little line in the yellow pages, and he didn't even have a sign outside his house church. And I knocked on the door for church one night, and he was very, very nervous acting. And he actually asked me, well, how'd you find us? Not like, we're interested in how people are finding us. How'd you find us? It's like, how'd you find us? So I didn't stay there. Oh, my word. And so I was down to choosing between these two churches. And the one church that I didn't go to had some life. And I would have rather been a part of that church. And I ended up there. But That preacher had some life in him. He was an older man, but he could preach and teach. It seemed like his people loved him. He'd only been there a couple of years. He'd taken it over. Um, they had some problems there, like any church does, but it just seemed like there was some life and there was some power, and he had some teaching on him and some preaching, and just good with people. I really liked that man, but he was divorced. He wasn't remarried. He wasn't going to get remarried, so therefore I felt he was still qualified. But the other church, it was boring as all get out. I didn't know that at the time, but he was it was still a solid church, and been married, been in ministry for years. But man, so we joined this other church, and at this church, it always happens. He had me. I took over the youth program. I took over the music program. Started leading the choir, leading congregations. Started preaching and teaching. He made me the second man, even though he had other men there. He made me the second man, and there's no pat on my back. It's just that's who I am. That's who God made me to be. And we were experiencing life, and we were experiencing growth, and we were happy there. Happy there. I was happy there. But one man and wife, I'm not going to tell the story, was just causing problems. And the pastor went on vacation one time. He says, "You're in charge. Look out for this couple. Surprise me." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, they're going to try to control you while I'm gone." They did. I wouldn't let them. He got back to the pastor. The pastor was on my side. This went on for several months, for a couple months. He said, "Hey, you just deal with him like you feel you need to deal with. I told you they were going to try to do this." But this man wouldn't make anything right, wouldn't. Long story short, I started sensing something ain't right here, something ain't right here. And it's usually finance or females or friendships. And one day the pastor said something to me, and I thought, "Hey, why are you saying that? Totally against what we've been talking about." Anyway, long story short, I got kicked out. And it turned out later, this man was having an affair with a woman in the church. The pastor was. It was a part of the church that I loved and respected this man, dearly, deeply loved and respected this man. I've gone too long on this video, totally turned his back on me, lied about me, lied to me, to others. He lied to my face. I caught him in a bold-faced lie. We left. Now I left quietly because I'm not there to disturb the peace or to cause a ruckus. But I'm older now, and I'm gonna deal with that crap now. I'm gonna deal with it face on. We're not gonna cover this up. But I was still fairly young and left quietly. I don't know. All the other churches are eluding my mind right now. So then going through problems of my own, my wife leaving me and all that stuff because I was a moron. And so traveling, being part of different towns to be there where my wife was, and anyway, got involved in the church. Got involved in the church. Oh my word. And in some ways the worst I've ever been a part of. Great man, loved the pastor. Very kind, very gracious. Not a bad teacher, preacher. But he was still lacking. And the church was dead. Flippin' stinking dead. Church is dead. And through a bunch of circumstances, the Lord always does this. That second man that was there ended up causing problems, ended up leaving. And I was there. I started leading the singing, preaching. I was preaching there all the time. But this church has seven. It's a small church building, but you could probably fit 100 people in the auditorium and not be too tight. But you don't got 13 coming faithfully at all. And see, I'm fed up with pastors who don't see the obvious or choose not to see the obvious. Listen, leadership is top down, dude. If the church is dead, you're dead. If there's no people there, you're to blame. The mirror is the image of the pew is the mirror. The pew is the mirror image of the pulpit. And how men just go on years and years and years and don't acknowledge that. Don't make it right. Well, I'm preaching truth. I'm preaching right. You've been here for 25, 30 years, dude. You got 13 people in your church. They ain't doing nothing. And out of the 13 that are so-called members of the church, and churches have hundreds of people on their membership roll that don't ever come to church. I'm getting to my main point. And getting to the point where you don't care what people think about you. You're going to speak the truth. At the same time, being respectful of people. And you don't have to say everything or name names, but out of the 13 so-called people that are supposedly still somewhat showing up, you only had 3 women. 3 elderly women. And still capable, still, one was still running her own business with her husband, and then they retired the business, and, she's still healthy and active. Another lady still healthy and active, and another lady off and on coming in and out of wheelchairs and different things like that. But 3 spiritual women is all you got. The men here are pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Flipping, stinking pathetic. And let me tell you this. When you're entering into your call, when things don't seem right and you're wandering and you're stirring or whatnot, God is using your present circumstances, the uneasy circumstances. Those are one of the ways He's getting you to move on. And me being surrounded by idiot, pathetic men put me on a path of getting a coaching program together, at least finalizing God's calling on my life to start coaching and teaching and preaching on masculinity and spiritual men. Pathetic. And I've given stories about the dealings I've had with those men. And ultimately I had to say some things to the pastor. And just never was made anything right. I was lied to. Words were not kept. I was cussed out. Threatened. Not by the pastor, but it just, and after a couple things, I said, listen, if we don't deal with these men, and this one particular man properly, biblically, like we said we're going to do, then I'm going to have to leave. I can't keep doing this. And what we said was going to happen to that man never did happen. And, I told him, I said, listen, I can't stay here. Lord's calling me on. I got to move on. I can't stay here anymore. And so, through circumstances, He got me to this town. I believe it's in this town, but I'm in limbo right now. I put out a couple advertisements to start a ministry here and looking for men who want to be a part of a ministry here and possibly turn that into a church. And I've had about 3 men reach out, but no follow through. I haven't got to the point where I think I need to go out there knocking doors on Saturdays, but that's where I am. That's me. That's where I am right now. I'm in limbo. Church has been a major part of my life, my whole life, since I was 13 years old. And I've now been out of church for 3 months. And I'm thankful for where I am. There's a whole lot about my situation that is not good, that I don't like, but it's where God has me right now. And I'm thankful I'm not part of that church anymore and in that situation. So where's God got you? Maybe you got to get out of a situation and be open. I'm not saying forsake everything else and just quit on God or quit on life or whatnot, but you may have to go through a transition that you don't really know what it means. Hopefully this video will help you. If you want to go further, faster, we got coaching programs. Either way, like and subscribe, comment in the sections below. Send your phone number, email if you want to do it that way. Say I'm ready, or you can email us, Chris Huffman 513 at Gmail, ChrisHuffman 513, or text 970-697-0232, and we'll see what we can do for you, and we'll get you going on a path. And until we meet again, keep your eyes on Him.